Hello and welcome to the Danny4 Foundation's podcast, where we talk about the ocean, the beating blue heart of our planet, the blue economy, transparency, accountability and good governance, leadership and gender, and youth. I'm your host, Larry Chetty. In this episode, we take a look at the use of smart technology by Nature Seychelles to gather data on the effect of climate change on nesting sea turtles and coral reefs in the Seychelles archipelago. The island of Cousin lies 44 kilometers from Victoria, the capital of Seychelles. Cousin Island is home to the endemic Seychelles warbler and other threatened wildlife. It is also the most important hawksbill turtle nesting site in the Western Indian Ocean. The island, including 400 meters of surrounding waters, was declared a special reserve by the government in 1975. It is one of the world's first whole island and sea reserve. The NGO Nature Seychelles manages Cousin Island since 1998. Nature Seychelles has entered into an innovative partnership with two local tech companies, Oceanlabs and Kingsgate Electronics, to pioneer locally made cutting-edge conservation technology. These are Nest Electronic Surveillance of Turtles, or NEST, and Diver Reef Evaluation Assisted Monitoring, or DREAM for short. Dr. Nirmal Jivan Shah is the chief executive of Nature Seychelles. He explains the rationale behind this revolutionary collaboration.
Basically, soon after we had COVID and there was a sort of meltdown in the world, I would say. The world changed dramatically. I wrote a very short article which was published by IUCN, the World Conservation Congress. And it turned out to be extremely popular and influential, which I hadn't realized. And the title was, we should be looking more towards e-conservation, what I call e-conservation, which is electronic conservation, and AI and various other virtual reality and whatnot. And I explained that in that article. This article was taken up by IUCN and attracted Huawei. So Huawei, through IUCN, invited me on a big international Zoom conference to talk about the new conservation using tech for conservation. And about 1 million people tuned into that. That was very influential. Subsequently, Huawei gave us a grant through IUCN of $200,000 to develop these ideas further. And two of the ideas were based on the reality of things here, which is we need to do things in a completely different way because we've been doing conservation for years in the same old way, gathering data, which we have the same problems, we have the same deficiencies. So two aspects of it which we try to explore with a couple of tech companies here was, one is how do we manage to get enough data information on the impact of climate change on nesting sea turtles. Cousin Island is the most important nesting site for hawksbill turtles in the entire Western Indian Ocean, and we manage Cousin Island Special Reserve. We know from other research done in other places that as the world becomes hotter, temperature has an impact on reptiles. Turtles are reptiles, and it changes their sex. So as the planet gets hotter, you will see a change in the sex of these populations, and that's detrimental, obviously. So we wanted to have some devices that would measure this, as well as measure other things like storms, because we've had a lot of problems with high tides, storms washing away nests and whatnot. We wanted a device that had these sensors in there that gave us early warning and would gather information for us to be able to understand what was happening to these endangered animals. So we worked with Daniel Hugelman and his partner to develop such a device. We gave him our needs, we gave him the sort of logistical support, the money to sort of explore all that. Came up with a device, tested it in the field, had some problems, tested it again, revised it, and so forth. The next device was what happens to coral reefs during climate change. We know they bleach, but there are things happening in the water column. Temperature changes, acidity, because we know that the oceans are acidifying, these kinds of things. Now, people have developed buoys with these probes in it to gather this kind of data. But in Seychelles, with these kind of high tides and storms, we have found out that buoys get lost very easily. Whether they are mooring buoys, whether they're instrumentation buoys, they get lost very easily. And a buoy like that will cost thousands of dollars and suddenly it gets lost, okay? And you've lost it forever. I wanted a device that is carried by our divers when they are monitoring our coral reef restoration areas. So we have divers in the water every day for the last 12 years undertaking restoration of coral reefs around Cousin. So this device measures various things like temperature, pH, and so forth when the divers are down there monitoring or planting corals. Then this is then taken and that data is downloaded. So these were the two devices that the challenge to Ocean's Lab, the sort of gauntlet I threw to them, do this. And they did it. Some problems, but they managed to do it with off-the-shelf components.
What was the time frame?
The time frame was a year and a half. Okay? So they had enough time. But it was difficult. It was quite difficult because they don't have peers. This is the problem with all of us. We don't have peers. We don't have seniors. We don't have allied technology around that can help like in other bigger countries. You can't just go to an electronics shop and say, hey guys, manufacture this for me through a 3D printer or something like that, okay? So they had to do everything themselves. Very interesting process. The process of co-developing, I would say, these kind of devices was as interesting as the product. This came under this project that we had provided to Huawei, and Huawei gave us money, which is called the Smart Island Concept.
This is the Danny 4 Foundation podcast, and we are speaking with Dr. Nirmal Jivan Shah, the CEO of Nature Seychelles, on the use of smart technology in conservation projects. Through innovative partnerships with other tech companies, Nature Seychelles aims to harness the power of technology to cost-effectively overcome operational challenges to nature conservation.
We can't do conservation the way we were doing it for years. So the Smart Island concept was that Cousin has to be in a sort of place where it can be digitized. The island itself can be digitized. So we're working on various concepts, which I won't get into right now. But this particular project was to be able to get very high-speed internet without a lot of expense so that these devices, especially the turtle device, which we had called Nest, could remotely send data to the conservation officer's office or his laptop or his smartphone. The internet service that we had there was not good enough for that. So we had to be able to get a new kind of technology that would have this broadband, high-speed internet throughout the island without spending a lot of money every month. And we did it through a local company which gave us this microwave kind of installation. And the microwave signal from our office on Prale is transmitted free of charge across the ocean to Cousin, where there are receivers receiving it, and it carries internet with it. And it's free. Of course, you have to pay for the consumption of the internet, but the whole package that sends this high speed there is free now. So we had to pay for the installation and the equipment and whatnot. So it's very interesting. And I think that we are the first civilian organization in Seychelles to have this kind of electronic facility. So it gives us the ability to have, for example, the next step would be streaming, remote streaming. We have cameras everywhere on the island where you have 24/7 streaming of video, which can be used for surveillance, anti-poaching, but also for education, because you can stream it all the time, and it's cheap because it's part of the expense is free, not all of it, but part of it is free. So that's the technology that we've now installed. And of course, this is just the beginning. And we want to get more and more funding for these kinds of things.
And how does this change your approach to conservation?
In Seychelles, as we know, we have certain problems. We don't have enough people. Okay? And yet we have many islands, a huge EEZ, and we don't have the capacity to be able to coordinate, to manage, to survey, to enforce, to even do research. There's just not enough people. So you will see that on a lot of these islands where there are conservation managers or people working, they're mostly foreigners. The idea is to try to digitize or tap into machine learning or AI tools or electronic tools like drones and so forth to be able to do a lot of these things that we cannot do and will never be able to do because we'll never have enough people in this country, but electronically.
So it's a way of managing your conservation program with less manpower.
That's correct. Unlike other places where people are scared that people will lose jobs or whatever because of AI or because of technology, here it's not going to happen because we just don't have enough people to fill these jobs.
Yeah. Actually, in your view, how do you see the role actually of artificial intelligence or AI in future conservation programs? And what would be the benefits?
Again, not enough people to analyze the data, let alone collect the data. So if we can automatize some of this collection of data, like with these small devices that we've made, but with other kind of devices, through all kinds of other things that are going on in the world. And then that data, when it comes, is pushed through AI, like machine learning, where the AI will be able to analyze it, compare it to data all over the world, very quickly, and give us the reports. At the moment, Seychelles in general is particularly bad with analyzing data. Okay? And it doesn't matter, it's not just conservation, it's everything. So when you go on the net or when you're trying to write a paper and you're trying to find published information about this or that or the other, it's very difficult to find. It may be available, but some government department is sitting on it, not wanting to publish it or not wanting to give it, or maybe it's just not available because nobody has taken this data, desegregated it, and analyzed it. And this is the issue. We need to have the ability to break down data and analyze it. And I think that AI gives us that opportunity.
That was the CEO of Nature Seychelles, Dr. Nirmal Jivan Shah, speaking to the Danny4 Foundation podcast on the use of smart technology to assist towards turtle conservation and coral monitoring on Kozai Island Special Reserve in the Seychelles archipelago. In our next episode, we speak to the Director of Policy and Ocean Race Summits at the Ocean Race, Jivan Stride, on the campaign to obtain rights for the ocean.
This idea of ocean rights stems from a legal concept based on nature's rights, where you acknowledge that the nature has own legal rights. And normally that is land-based, and it's sort of acknowledged a forest or a sea or a lake, which is sort of recognized as a legal entity.
Jivan Stride on ocean rights coming up in the next episode of the Danny4 Foundation podcast with your host, Larry Chetty. Don't forget to follow us on Podbean, Spotify, Google Podcast, Amazon Music or Apple Podcast to keep up to date with weekly episodes. Thank you for listening. Till next time, goodbye.